Shelley Winter Show. Live, local, topical, and relevant. So, starting on Monday. So, Monday is the 1st. Early voting for the runoffs start the next Monday. So all next week, we're going back at 7:36. All next week, we'll be doing endorsements, Shelley Winter Show endorsements on the Republican and Democrat side. Now, let me make many of you understand, because I'm told that some people don't get nuance. I didn't say it. That's what I was told. So I'm endorsing the people who I think should win on the Democrat side. Not that I'm voting for them. I'm just going to tell you some of the endorsements that I have are Democrats. Primarily, in some cases, it's because there's no Republican running. It's just two Democrats, right? And so I'm going to make endorsements in those. But that's all going to be next week at 7:36, starting on Monday and going through Friday. So Chris Carr came in fourth. Interesting about Chris Carr. Chris Carr announced earliest of all the candidates for governor. Chris Carr announced way, way early. And the story goes, I don't know, this is just the rumor mill, the stuff you hear, at different meetings in different corners of the political universe. The rumor has it that at a certain point around the fall, certain powerful Republicans in Georgia went to Rick Jackson to convince him to run for governor. This is what I heard. Some former governors and some people in that kind of camp, right? But I don't know how true it is, because one of those governors ended up endorsing Chris Carr. Also, that camp that would have asked the Rick Jackson to come out and run, Chris Carr had been running for almost a year. He had announced. He was the first to announce. He announced in the spring of last year. Then Burt announced last summer. Brad Raffensperger announced a little bit after Burt. And then Rick Jackson jumped in January, February of this year. So I get the Burt anger or the Burt dislike. That's been going on since he basically came into power. The establishment never liked Burt, which is why he's endorsed by Donald Trump, because the establishment in Georgia kind of never liked Donald Trump either. But you would think the establishment would have liked Chris Carr. The question has to be asked is, why didn't they? He announced first. His fundraising did not take off. And he was kind of muddling along. I like the guy personally. I think he was a great attorney general. I think was a great candidate. I think he's in the wrong time, really, right? You know what I mean? But it's interesting because he never got the endorsements, except for one former governor, but he never really got the endorsements of that other wing of the Georgia Republican Party. What you may derisively call them rhinos or whatever, but I just call them traditional Republicans. And so he muddled along, and now he's endorsing Rick Jackson. Rick Jackson, who, by the way, ran as a Trump guy. I'm like Trump. I'm like Trump. Trump. While mimicking the policies that have already been pushed and covered. Property taxes, state income taxes, things like that have already been done or are currently being done. And so you had the Trump thing and nothing unique in policy. So it's interesting that Chris Carr would endorse Rick Jackson. I see him really just saying, I'm going to stay out of it. Because there's really none of these guys. Of course, he's not going to endorse Burt, because he and Burt they're different parts of the Republican Party. And I don't get the feeling that they ever really got along. Burt's kind of like good old boy Burt, former athlete, fun guy. Chris is more your, chinos and polo shirt, establishment, country club Republican type. Burt's farmer. Burt's the dirt. Burt's the rule guy. The guys that these guys look at, he's just unsophisticated, but we've got to put up with him. That's kind of the war that's being fought right now. So it's surprising to me that Chris Carr would go with Rick Jackson. It's going to be interesting to see what Brad Raffensperger does. Because I'll tell you this, I went through all of that to make this point. Chris Carr voters are not going to Rick Jackson. Chris Carr voters are doing one of two things. They're staying home or they're going to vote for Burt Jones. But if you're a Chris Carr voter, you're part of that 11, 12% that he got in the primary. You're either going to Burt. Why? Because there's experience there. You're smart enough. See, a Chris Carr voter is a person who took time to look at all the candidates and they said, hey, I'm for this guy. I don't really like the whole Trumpy thing on Burt Jones' side. I don't really like the guy coming out of nowhere and dropping $60 million. Because also you got to understand that $60 million, $70 million, whatever he dropped hurt your guy, Chris Carr. Pushed him out of the way. Whatever chance he had before Rick Jackson came along was completely wiped out by Rick Jackson, which is why I'm more surprised that he endorsed Rick Jackson, because Rick Jackson ran him out of the race. With Burt Jones, Brad Raffensperger, and Chris Carr, the original three in the race for governor, Chris Carr was running for second. Behind a Donald Trump endorsed Burt Jones. Chris Carr was running for second to get into a runoff. Jackson comes in with $70 million out of nowhere, wipes him out, wipes out Raffensperger. So I'm surprised that he came out to endorse Rick Jackson. And that's fair. That's good. Good for him. He can do whatever he wants to. I'm surprised, but I saw it coming because I saw it coming from the debates. But I know for a fact that the vast majority of Chris Carr voters are not going to flip over to Rick Jackson. One, they know that guy hurt their guy's chances, number one. Number two, they're also informed voters. They're not emotional voters. And they were going with Chris Carr because in their mind, this was the solid Republican candidate for governor that was going to keep Georgia on the same path as Brian Kemp, whom they like as well. Rick Jackson's a wild card. They don't know what they're going to get with him. So they're going to go with the experienced Burt Jones. I like it's good. It's newsworthy. Chris Carr endorsed Rick Jackson. It's newsworthy for the Rick Jackson supporters. But trust me, the majority of Chris Carr voters are not going to Rick Jackson's camp. They're going straight to Burt's camp, or they're going to leave them both alone and vote Senate, skip over governor, and go down ballot R. Shelley Winter Show. We'll be right back.